Hello and welcome to today's town hall with PETA President Ingrid Newkirk and PETA Senior Vice President Kathy Guillermo. I'm Ben Williamson, PETA's Senior International Media Director, and I'll be co-hosting tonight's conference. Our first member town hall of 2018. Ingrid and Kathy will give you a brief review of some of what we've accomplished together during the last year, along with an inside look at some of our plans for 2018. They'll be joined on the line in the call later by Brittany Peet, Director of Captive Animal Law Enforcement for the PETA Foundation, who will tell you about what exploits her department has been up to and give you a glimpse of some of the wonderful animals they have rescued. And Dan Paden, PETA's Director of Evidence Analysis, who will give details on a new PETA eyewitness investigation that is making headlines here and abroad. To ask a question is simple. If you are joining us on the phone at any time during this town hall, just press 0 to ask a question. A PETA staff member will note down your question and then put you back into the meeting until you can ask the question live a little later in the meeting. If you have access to a computer, you can also stream this meeting and participate live at peta.org/January Town Hall. Once you log in, type in your question in the field at the bottom of your screen and listen to the town hall without using your phone. Our town halls always bring in more questions than we can answer in a single meeting, and while we may not get to everyone during today's call, we will follow up and answer each one directly in the days to come. We're just waiting for a couple more people to join, so a quick reminder that at any time during today's conversation, you can press 7 to renew your PETA membership for 2018 or make a much appreciated donation. If you're joining us online, you can visit peta.org/renew to make a gift as well. So for those of you just joining us, very quickly, my name is Ben Williamson. I'm PETA's Senior International Media Director, and I'm responsible for bringing worldwide media attention to PETA's work. Ingrid, Kathy, Brittany, and Dan will all be on the line shortly, and together they'll share updates on our latest eyewitness investigations, news of some wonderful rescues, and details on a few hard-won recent victories that you helped make possible. And I'm just getting word that we should have most of our callers on the line, so let me turn it over to PETA President Ingrid Newkirk. Ingrid.
Thank you, Ben. And hello to everyone joining us for our first Town Hall of 2018. I'm calling you today from the Sam Simon Center in Norfolk, Virginia. And if you hear barking during the call, that means that our guest rooms are actually full tonight, full of dogs who are going onto our clinics in the morning for spay and neuter surgery. If you hear typing, it means one of the cats in the office is walking over the keys. If this is your first town hall, welcome to you. We hold these meetings every 3 months or so, and it's all to keep our key supporters updated on new cases and, of course, new victories for animals. This also gives us a chance to take questions directly from you, which we like, and hopefully you'll leave today's meeting inspired to do even more for animals during the year to come. If not, you know who to write to. So some of you may have noticed that in every PETA annual review, including the new 2017 edition that's on our website at the moment, there's a page called The Year in Numbers. And many of our members say that aside from the pictures, it's their favorite part of the review. I'm so caught up in the stories that this kind of surprised me, but I suppose it does make sense that that's where you learn, for example, that apropos what I just mentioned with the dogs, PETA sterilized more than 13,000 dogs and cats just last year. We added an amazing 518 new members, new names, to our list of companies that don't test on animals, something that our members are always asking us about. And we fulfilled requests for over 500,000 copies of our new vegan starter kit. So those numbers resonate. One more statistic for you. I'm happy to report that PETA is now ranked as the, quote, most engaged with organization on social media on the planet. And maybe one more is that our Facebook page is followed by nearly 5 million people now. That was something that was unimaginable, as you can guess, when we started. There wasn't even an internet. But you know that progress isn't tracked solely by numbers. It has a face. And because so many animals are abused and neglected every day all over the world, progress is measured by our work to change minds and stop barbaric practices and pull animals out of absolute hellholes. So I want to look back just for a sec at 2017. 2017 was another year that you made it possible for us to do major things. For PETA this time to secure the world's first ever cruelty to animals convictions of sheep shearers, men who stomp on and punch and badly injure sheep. No such convictions, believe it or not, had ever happened in history. You also helped us take boats out into the floodwaters, and we rescued animals who were left shaking in their boots after the hurricanes that ravaged Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico. We brought back 63 dogs from Puerto Rico. One was in a neck brace, another was in a leg cast, one had raw skin, and maybe two had raw skin, but they all came back on a private plane. And it's so wonderful to be able to say that. That private plane was thanks to a member who realized that we couldn't get on any commercial flights and said, all right, bring them back, I'll hire a plane for you. So you always rally. One longtime member dropped everything to write and to help as we worked to close, and we did close it, this disgusting blood bank in an old turkey factory farm. And that case allowed us to free more than 150 greyhounds. That was actually 151 greyhounds from that filthy facility. And all of them have either found homes or they're going to find homes. Wonderful success. You also made it possible in 2017 for us to move desperate bears like Elsie from that seedy roadside zoo in Alabama to a beautiful sanctuary. And now she can run through tall grass, she can splash about in water, and for the first time ever, she can enjoy being a normal bear. And when the deadly Arctic, whatever it was, bomb cyclone slammed into the East Coast this winter, our members were there helping us physically or through the mail or whatever, provide everything we needed, from snow chains to food that our field workers and volunteers, everything they needed to work around the clock and give all this relief that absolutely had to come to animals out there. In some cases, we were able to remove dogs and other animals who had been chained up outside in these record-breaking low temperatures. We talked about numbers, but for a dog left out in that blizzard, the only important number was one, and that was the one PETA field worker who came through those frozen streets and those bone-chilling winds to reach them and take them out of there. And back to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. I know myself and our entire media team, in fact, went on the red alert almost as soon as we heard those words that you mentioned, bomb cyclone. And judging from the amount of coverage, there are dozens of advisories on taking animals indoors and breaking up ice for wildlife and tips to help animals keep animals safe during the storm received. I'm sure there were many, many animals' lives saved as a result of that. And of course, we sent out those emergency advisories for the fires too, another terrible situation.
Yes, the advisories are really, really important. Before we bring on tonight's first speaker, let me also update you on something that started in 2013, but isn't over yet. And this involves an animal that few people give a second thought to. Get ready, it's lobsters. I want to touch on this because you may remember PETA's groundbreaking video that was taken inside a lobster processing plant, which of course is just a cute name for a slaughterhouse. This was in Maine, and we broke this story on CBS News back then. A lot of people don't think about lobsters in the same way as they think about dogs or monkeys or elephants, of course. But our video was pretty shocking, even to people who hadn't thought about lobsters. If you do think about what lobsters feel, this video was shocking. It showed workers who were tearing off the lobster's claws, then using metal pipes to pry their heads from their bodies, and these lobsters were alive. So the parts of the lobster's body that were still alive, and according to every expert, able to feel pain quite acutely, were simply being pitched into the garbage, and you could see them moving. We got in touch with people who study lobsters, and they've shown that, like us, lobsters are pretty amazing. They have a long childhood. They flirt. Well, my flirting days are over, but for some of us, they're like us. And they can live for more than 100 years. Unlike human beings, though, lobsters have a very complex pain system. They feel pain through these masses of nerve tissue or ganglia that go throughout their entire bodies. And I think you know that in many restaurants, lobsters simply have their backs cut open, and the chef or the cook puts butter and salt in the wound, and then they just slip them alive back under the grill. So this prolonged agony the animals endure when someone does that, or when they drop them into scalding water, is almost imaginable. But anyway, in the weeks after that case grabbed headlines, tens of thousands of people took action on our site, and they swore off ever eating lobster again, which was just terrific. But since then, better things have happened. The slaughterhouse was investigated. It closed its doors. And last year, its former owner, who is Linda Bean of LL Bean, she gave up her ambition of becoming what she called the Frank Perdue of lobsters. And she's now all but out of the business entirely. But despite a mountain of evidence that lobsters suffer like this, no one has ever been willing to prosecute or to order a cease and desist at any of these places. But just a few weeks ago, Switzerland made it illegal to throw live lobsters into boiling water or to keep them on ice in a market. I mean, that is revolutionary. That legislation comes after a 2017 ruling by Italy's highest court that lobsters can't be kept on ice anymore because, as they say, it causes them unjustifiable suffering. So if we've made sure now that that news is widely disseminated all over, including in the United States and Maine, because it does set the stage for a future legal action here in the United States. Everything takes time, but these are all steps. And finally, on the food front, I hope you have heard the joyous news that Hot's Kitchen in California, where the so-called celebrity chef defended foie gras for years and years, has just closed down. So the press report I read yesterday cited PETA's constant protests, and our staff used to run out the door and stand outside with a sign. Of course, there is no justification for causing any animal suffering. We've recently exposed other restaurants where the patrons eat live animals. And to tell you more about those horrid investigations, but they're very, very important, and they're extremely interesting. They give you all the information you need to make changes and educate other people. I'm going to be joined right now by someone many of you have heard on these meeting calls before, and that's PETA's Director of Evidence Analysis, Dan Paden. Dan and his team sort through thousands of pages of documents, countless hours of sometimes horrific video, just for one single investigation. So I'm going to turn it over to him now, and he'll tell you more. Dan, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, and good evening again, everyone. It is a pleasure to join all of you. I had the tremendous honor of working on that Linda Bean investigation that Ingrid just mentioned. And I reviewed the raw footage of the workers tearing apart those lobsters and crabs while they were still alive and while they were fully conscious. And as Ingrid mentioned, that slaughterhouse is now closed, and people are seemingly waking up to the fact, in the U.S. and abroad, waking up to the fact that these animals feel the awful pain of those agonizing deaths. But despite all that, some restaurants in the U.S. and Canada have actually taken the cruelty of dismembering live animals upon themselves, and they're now serving the still writhing animals to their patrons on plates. You might remember a little more than a year ago, PETA went inside restaurants in Los Angeles and in New York City for a truly groundbreaking investigation that revealed that live octopuses and other sea animals were being butchered and served while still writhing to diners. Well, now we've exposed those very same horrors at some restaurants in Canada. For instance, last year at a restaurant in Toronto, our investigators saw an octopus pulled out of a tank, tossed onto a cutting board, pinned down, and mutilated. The chef that day, he started at the tip of each arm and leg of the animal, and he worked his way up slowly, chopping off section after section of each of the animal's limbs before finally dicing up the animal's head. And all of this ridiculous cruelty, all of this was for this grotesque dish called Sonic G. At another restaurant, notorious for these live animal dishes, we saw a chef yank an octopus from a tank, walk straight into his kitchen, and return moments later with a plate of squirming, severed tentacles for his patrons. Many of us have heard or seen stories about how intelligent octopuses are. There was a best-selling book about them last year. In fact, I remember a report several years ago about an octopus who kept getting out of a tank and escaping at an aquarium. These animals use tools. They are bright. Sometimes people refer to them as the so-called primates of the sea. Obviously, like any other animal, they feel the pain when the chef drives that knife into their limbs and they're sliced apart. Other restaurants that we investigated in Canada were cutting the tails off shrimp and lobsters and serving their live, still conscious upper bodies, sashimi style, right next to their mutilated tails. And this is just for diners' amusement. One patron at one restaurant actually uploaded a photo of a flailing live lobster's body and his or her severed tail plated right next to each other, side by side. And that restaurant also serves shrimp's severed tails right next to their still moving heads as if they were just decorations. So we took the evidence from Toronto, we filed a complaint, we submitted the evidence and the findings to the Ontario SPCA, and they agreed that octopuses are protected by the provincial cruelty to animals legislation. And officials promptly informed at least one of those restaurants of that law, marking perhaps the first time ever that cruelty to animals legislation has ever been used to protect octopuses in restaurants. So continuing groundbreaking work here. But this dish, this Sonic G, it's still being served by one Toronto area restaurant, which is called Murado Sushi. And others are still dismembering live lobsters and other sea animals to serve up on plates. So as you can tell, we've done a lot of work, but more work remains. But you can help us. You can visit PETA.org/live-eating, and there you can urge these restaurants that are still engaging in this, you can urge them to stop this slaughter. You can also support our calls on lawmakers to introduce legislation that would prohibit animals from being mutilated and served alive.
Thank you, Dan. And I know our members often contact us and ask what they can do when they spot a YouTube video about live eating. So if one of them shows up in your social media feed, be sure to share the URL with PETA.org/live-eating. Share that URL and urge others to help stop the cruelty. And before we go back to Dan, please, a quick reminder that at any time during today's conversation, you can press 7 to renew your membership for 2018 or make a much appreciated donation. And anytime you can ask a question by pressing 0 on your phone, and we really do want to hear from you tonight, so press 0 to ask a question. Thanks. Dan.
Thank you, Ben. This next case I want to speak about, I know it's very dear to many people. It involves donkeys, and I know it's of deep interest to many people. This new breaking case, it was released recently by PETA Asia, but as we see with all our cases, the cruelty that we document in one place, it reaches far beyond, and it has impacts in many other countries. This case starts in China, where sadly tonight, right now, thousands of donkeys, some of them just 5-month-old babies, really, are being kept in atrocious conditions. Before they are, these are tough words to say, tough images to have in one's mind, but they are bludgeoned with a sledgehammer before their throats are slit. Other donkeys face that same awful, terrifying end after enduring a grueling journey. And all of this is done so that the skin can be pulled from their bodies and then boiled down and sold to make gelatin, which shows up in this traditional Chinese medicine, which is known as ejiao. The market for ejiao is growing, unfortunately. It's found in food, it's found in beverages, candy, and even beauty products. And those products are not only for sale in China, they're for sale in a lot of other surprising places that I'll tell you about. So this case starts with the PETA Asia observer who visited farms, as I said, in China. And at every single place, that observer found sick and malnourished donkeys. Many of the animals were kept in their own waste. They were kept in cramped, filthy, concrete-floored pens. And you can't call this living. You can't call this a life. It's nothing but a dreadful existence. And at the end of that, several months or a year of life, many of those animals felt that heavy blow of a farmer's sledgehammer on their forehead before their throat was slit. And you can see in the footage some were very obviously breathing and moving even after being bludgeoned. Ejiao, this traditional medicine ingredient, it's in so much demand at the moment, it's essentially a big fad, that donkeys are actually being imported now from across Asia, from the Middle East, from Africa, and even South America into China. And they're being brought there just for that sledgehammer, just for that slaughter. Pakistan and 10 African countries have closed Chinese-funded slaughterhouses and have policies that ban the export of donkey skin to China, thankfully. But Australia and other countries now are actually considering opening up essentially a live export pipeline to ship donkeys to China just to take advantage of this lucrative but very cruel business. And of course, as you can imagine, PETA and its affiliates are all very busy trying to stop that. It's also very likely that China is obtaining skin from donkeys and burros who are sold in the United States and then exported to Mexico for slaughter. Many of you will remember PETA Asia's investigations in past years of the Chinese dog leather trade and of those Angora rabbit farms in China, all of which serve markets for goods here in the U.S. and in Europe. But as in those cases, as in this donkey case, there are no laws, not a single law, against the abuse of animals in farms or slaughterhouses in China. So none of the violence, none of the neglect that was captured in that footage in China, none of it's illegal. But there's hope, thanks to you. You can help us end this awful, cruel treatment of donkeys. We've got details on how you can do that on our website, PETA.org, and we have a full write-up on it in the new issue of PETA Global, which just came off the presses. It's beautiful as always, and it should be in your mailboxes very soon.
And may I say, Dan, for everybody listening, if you see products that are containing ejiao on Amazon, on eBay, or any other site, please raise Cain. A lot of times these big sites don't listen, but they need to. So tell them they should never sell a product that's made from such utter cruelty. TK Maxx, which is the European version of the U.S. retailer TJ Maxx, very quickly pulled a soup that was containing donkey oil from their shelves after PETA UK shared this new expose in the video with them. So things can happen, and we had a little development today with acupuncturists. So if you see an acupuncturist, ask them if they might be using a lotion or a potion that contains a gel. Please also just send an action memo or an alert to everyone that you know and post this case on your social media. The most important thing at the moment, other than ferreting out these products, is to write to the Chinese ambassador. And it has to be done very, very politely because they do not take well to outside intervention. So as much as this angers us, it has to be done politely. That's the strategy. Cases like those that Dan's team works on don't come cheaply, as you can imagine. It can sometimes take tens of thousands of dollars to conduct a single investigation. But when that case can help close down a slaughterhouse or change how thousands of consumers think about and treat animals, that's worth every penny. In the cases we just mentioned, it will all be a long, hard slog, no question. But in the end, what we see is, whether we accomplish all of it or some of it, animals will be saved, minds and hearts and habits will be changed just because of those investigations, because of that hard work. There is a sea of immense suffering. I don't have to tell you, but I just did. And we are working in it. We're stopping the pain for many, many animals. And we're making people far more aware and respectful of how they treat animals. If you haven't already, I do hope, please, that you'll consider the tremendous impact our investigative work has for animals. And if you would like to contribute to it, we would love to have your help. Please press 7 on your phone to renew your PETA membership for 2018, or just to make a donation that will be put to work to save animals. Thank you for that. And now we're going to be joined by another familiar voice to many of you. That's PETA Senior Vice President Kathy Guillermo. Last October, some of you may remember, Kathy spoke about our campaign to stop really hideous experiments on dogs at Texas A&M University. And I thought it would be very useful if she could share some updates on that campaign, as well as give us some information on some others that she's also working on. So over to you, Kathy, please.
Thank you, Ingrid. Before I talk about the progress in that investigation that we told you about in the fall, I just want to share some good news with you. We recently approached Tokyo-based Yakult Foods. It makes a probiotic product that's sold in the U.S. in stores like Walmart, other grocery stores, and around the world. We uncovered that it had fed mice probiotics, and then it subjected them to horrible things, including radiation and infection, before killing them. Some mice were fed an apple pomace extract, and then they were forced to run on a treadmill until they were exhausted. So we pointed out to the company that the results of their tests were irrelevant to human health. They weren't required by law, and they involved common human food ingredients that have no toxicity concerns. So these studies could have been done with human volunteers, and they would have been much better. So tonight I'm pleased to report that Yakult's president has contacted us and has told us that the company and all its subsidiaries will no longer perform any experiments on animals, and instead will conduct only animal-free studies. So we applaud Yakult for embracing modern human-relevant methods of research, and it's in good company. It now joins a growing list of companies that have agreed to eliminate animal tests after discussions with PETA, including Barilla, the Coca-Cola Company, House Foods, Kikkoman, Lipton, Ocean Spray, Palm Wonderful, and Welch's, among others. So now on to a new case. Some longtime supporters will recall a PETA investigation in the 90s that blew the lid off the industry that sells cats and other animals for classroom dissections. That investigation helped spark a movement that led to the adoption of dissection choice policies in schools around the U.S. Now, nearly a quarter century later, we've unearthed some new horrors at a Minnesota company that sells animals for dissection. At BioCorporation, a PETA eyewitness documented workers submerging entire crates of live pigeons in a tank of water to kill them. This same sort of thing we stopped in Taiwan, where dogs used to be drowned in the same way. And the veterinarian who watched our footage noted that the birds would experience prolonged pain and distress before they drowned. Also, fully conscious turtles were put in a freezer to kill them, a horrifically painful and slow way to die. And one facility worker jokingly called that pretty effing cool. Workers even injected live, fully conscious crayfish with liquid latex, an agonizingly slow and painful way to be killed. Based on PETA's evidence, though, and after a police investigation, the city's attorney's office in Alexandria, Minnesota, has now taken a groundbreaking step. It has filed 25 criminal cruelty to animals charges against Biocorporation, and these are related to drowning pigeons and injecting the live crayfish with latex. No one has ever brought such charges before, so this is really historic. We're also upping the pressure on colleges and school systems that still do business with companies like Biocorporation to finally cut out dissection in favor of modern, humane methods. No child should be given a cruelly killed animal, as if there's nothing wrong with that. So a lot of work is going on here.
Thank you, Kathy. And sorry, just a quick interruption in case you missed Ingrid's mention a few minutes ago. To make more investigations like this one possible, just press 7 on your phone to donate right now. And if you're joining us online, please go to PETA.org/donate to give or renew your PETA membership for 2018. Kathy.
Thanks, Ben. So back in October, we discussed PETA's campaign to end cruel and deadly experiments on dogs at Texas A&M University. And you'll probably recall that these are experiments in which golden retrievers are bred to suffer the ravages of debilitating, painful canine muscular dystrophy. We're unrelenting in our campaign to force the university to close this dog laboratory and release all the dogs for adoptions to good homes. We've been to every Board of Regents meeting, uninvited, I might add. The activists were loud, they carried signs, and they had recordings of barking dogs with them. And we generated nationwide attention when activists ran onto the field with signs during the bowl game Texas A&M played in recently, and when a huge banner saying, "Stop Cruel Dog Tests," was unfurled at the university's December graduation. There are signs that the university is starting to buckle under the pressure. They are now quickly adopting out the dogs who are born healthy but carry the muscular dystrophy gene. And people involved in the work have stated publicly that the experimenter is under pressure to close down this laboratory. And they've told reporters that the order is from the president of the university. We've requested all records, and I sure hope we have more good news very soon. Last month, we also exposed years of experimenters violating animal welfare laws, again, at another infamous institution, the University of Utah, which is called the U. It was in 2009 that PETA revealed shocking experiments at the U on cats, dogs, monkeys, and other animals. We pushed hard then, and the USDA cited the university for multiple violations of animal welfare laws. And importantly, as a result of that investigation, Utah changed its law so that shelters are no longer compelled to sell dogs and cats to laboratories. But now new documents that we've gotten hold of revealed that last April, one experimenter injected an unapproved drug into a 2-month-old lamb and subjected him to a test that was not approved by the university's oversight committee or by the funding institution, which is the federal government. That lamb died, and a subsequent investigation found that at least 20 other lambs had undergone this very same procedure without approval. We found that another experimenter botched a 14-hour surgery and recording procedure that involved removing a part of a monkey's skull and inserting electrodes into his brain. And this monkey was then dumped back into a cage, and he was found dead there less than 24 hours later. This list of horrific violations that we found is very long, and I'll spare you most of it, but I did want to tell you that 2 rabbits also suffered a prolonged and painful death when an experimenter attempted to kill them with a carcinogenic agent that's not an approved method of euthanasia. 18 mice were found dead after an experimenter turned up the heat in their room to 98 degrees for no clear reason at all. Other mice were deliberately killed by slowly asphyxiating them with dry ice, and this is something that's expressly forbidden by both campus policy and federal grant guidelines as well. We're now asking the university that it be compelled to repay millions in taxpayer funds that were awarded during these periods of flagrant rule violations. And most importantly, that they prohibit these experimenters from ever working with animals again. It's really long past time that the experiments at the University of Utah and at Texas A&M end, and also that the experimenters behind these unethical practices face tangible consequences for what they've done.
Hear, hear. Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. Experimenters at places like that University of Utah and at Texas A&M really know that PETA doesn't just fade away after a period of time. All these cases take time, and they know we're absolutely relentless, we're absolutely determined, and we'll be all over them for as long as it takes, working every angle until they end the abuse. And we've shown we can do it. We had a case that took 14 years, never went away, and we won it. So Dan Paden has popped back on the line now, and he's going to talk about our latest closing investigation. But before he does, I must do my job, and please remind you that we will be taking your questions live at the end of our town hall. Just if you'd like to ask a question, press 0 on your phone right now, and a PETA representative will come on the line and help you, and we'd love to hear from you. So please press 0 to ask a question, any question. Dan, back to you, please.
Thank you so much. Hi again, everyone. As you probably know, PETA was the first animal protection organization to launch an international campaign against the wool industry. And with every protest, every company that drops wool from their lines, and there are a lot now, and with every new investigation we release, we are coming closer to the day when wool will be seen with the same revulsion as fur is today. First, years and years ago, we exposed mulesing, a practice that was common in Australia and in which farmers used gardening shears essentially to cut huge strips of flesh off of lambs' hindquarters with no pain relief whatsoever. After we convinced Liz Claiborne, H&M, and dozens of other major retailers to stop selling wool from mules to sheep, you might recall that the world's largest wool trade group sued PETA to make us stop. Well, that backfired. Eventually, they had to not only withdraw that lawsuit, but they had to fast-track alternatives to mulesing as well. Earlier tonight, Ingrid mentioned how we recently secured the first ever cruelty to animals convictions of sheep shearers, those men who stomped and punched and badly injured sheep. That was a historic win that meant so much to so many of us at PETA and to so many of you. But with the release of now our 7th wool industry expose just last month, we've seen, sadly, that the extreme cruelty to sheep in the Australian wool industry is still going on. It's still going strong. Shearers seem to think that no one can see in those sheds. Well, we can, and we have, yet again. The attacks on the sheep in this latest case often left those petrified prey animals bleeding from the eyes, from the nose, and their mouth. And the eyewitness saw cruelty in every single one of the Australian sheds visited across New South Wales and Victoria, which are the top wool-producing states in the world's top wool exporting country. Again, just like in 2014, terrified sheep were stomped on, slammed into the floor, before the shearers cut the wool from them as fast as possible. Remember, these guys get paid by how many sheep they shear, not by how many hours they work. Sometimes the workers cut off large, bloody swaths of skin. And as we've seen before, the workers used a filthy needle and thread to try to crudely sew up the worst gaping shearing wounds, again without any anesthetic. These gentle, docile animals writhed when the needles punctured their flesh, and not a single one of them was provided with any veterinary care whatsoever. As this and each of the 6 prior exposés prove, cruelty to sheep is rampant in the wool industry. It doesn't matter what the companies say. It doesn't matter what the industry says. Personally, I can tell you I've looked at probably 120 hours now of footage from this industry, and it could not be more clear. The only thing that you and I can do to guarantee that this abuse stops is to refuse to buy wool from anyone in any product. And of course, we all need to pass on each of these videos to everyone that we can, whether that's on social media or by sending a link to someone on email or showing it to them in person.
Absolutely, Dan. You said it right there. And I think you said something earlier about the fur campaign as well. And I think I suspect the fur campaign is actually a pretty apt comparison for the wool campaign that we're doing now, especially when you consider that luxury labels like Gucci and Michael Kors are now dropping fur from their lines after years and years of PETA protests. And of course, we're meeting with another major house soon, so details on that to come. And 20 years ago, few of us could even imagine that a country like Norway would shut down all its fur farms in our lifetimes. And as of a few weeks ago, of course, that's exactly what they decided they're going to do. Well, actually, 20 years ago, I was just 12, so I wasn't really thinking about it. But obviously, people at PETA were already hard at work.
Well said, Ben. Yes, Ingrid and PETA have a rich history of incredible wins, and the progress continues today and tomorrow and in the future. That said, it's clear that some companies, and I'm thinking of Canada Goose here, are basically still ignoring the writing on the wall. I'm sure many of us know well about the coyotes who are caught in steel traps and then shot or bludgeoned to death for the trim found on those Canada Goose jackets, that absurd piece around the jacket's neck. Ingrid calls it the deadline. Canada Goose tells consumers rather disingenuously that they're committed to so-called ethical sourcing. And obviously there's nothing ethical about a steel trap. But as the PETA expose that was undertaken in November shows, there's also nothing ethical about the suffering of the geese whose feathers are sewn into those Canada Goose coats. So late last year, as I said, PETA eyewitnesses paid a visit to a featured Canada Goose down supplier to have a look around. And they found workers rounding up frightened, confused geese into small wire pens. Those birds were so terrified that they piled up, and the geese were climbing on top of each other in a panic, gasping for air, some of them even suffocating. And meanwhile, the workers stood by and just ignored them. It was business as usual. Once the birds were penned up, the workers started grabbing them by their delicate necks, often 2 birds in each hand, and cramming them into these filthy transport crates. And some geese remained jammed in those crates for 24 hours, no food, not a drop of water, including during a 5+ hour journey down the highway to the slaughterhouse. Once they got there, they were unloaded for slaughter. They were tipped out of cages, and the geese had to watch, terrified, as their cage mates were again grabbed by the delicate neck, stunned, shackled upside down by their fragile legs, and killed right in front of them. One veterinarian we asked to watch our video said that the birds were showing signs of consciousness and sensibility, which of course means that they were awake and fully aware as they choked, as they suffocated, or as they died of blood loss and shock, which of course the expert called an extremely painful and anxiety-provoking condition. At the end of the day, whatever the product is, whether it's a Canada Goose jacket, it's an Angora sweater, or it's a wool blanket, if it came from an animal, the only truly ethical option that shoppers have is to just leave it on the shelf or the rack.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And every expose that we release and all the push we apply only means that good things happen. So we wish all the bad things would end now. And I know this has been pretty dismal, but we have someone coming up who's going to give us some joyous news. So hang on. But to help us speed up the clock on the demise of the hideous cruelties you've heard about and more, please press 7 on your phone now. Renew your PETA membership, please, for 2018, or make a donation if you can. It will be deeply appreciated. You can also renew online, as Ben said, by visiting PETA.org/renew. And if you've already done this, thank you very much. Now here's Brittany Peet. Brittany is the Captive Animal Law Enforcement Director for the PETA Foundation. And she's going to help us close out today's town hall with news on some very wonderful rescues that her team has made happen in just the last few weeks. So over to you, Brittany.
Yes, thank you, Ingrid. At PETA, I have the responsibility of defending the rights of animals who are used in zoos, circuses, and the film and television industry. And it has become my mission and my passion to get these animals out of their barren cages and give their lives a 180-degree turn. And that's exactly what happened with the bears Ben and Bogey, who some of you may be seeing on your screens now. It took years of inspections, complaints, and finally a lawsuit to get both bears out of their barren enclosures at the Triggembo Animal Park in North Carolina and into a spacious, sprawling Colorado sanctuary. But to give you some idea of how miserable the lives of these bears were at Triggembo, the enclosures they were confined to were about 4/10,000ths of a percent of the minimum range that they would occupy in nature. But under North Carolina law, citizens are able to sue private animal owners on grounds of cruelty to animals, which is why 2 advocates represented by PETA and a pair of North Carolina law firms filed a lawsuit seeking to have the bears transferred to a reputable sanctuary. Triggembo agreed to settle by releasing the bears if the plaintiffs agreed to drop the suit and arrange care for the animals. So we went to work, and with our help, both bears soon began their journey west to their new home. And now, 14-year-old Ben and 15-year-old Bogey are at a serene sanctuary in Colorado where they are finally able to run, roam, climb, and swim, and they even have the opportunity to hibernate this year, likely for the first time in their lives. And Ben and Bogey bring the total number of bears PETA has rescued over the past 5 years to, wait for it, 67. And we thank those of you who have made this possible. And with your help, there will be others soon to come. We've recently been in touch with a notorious player in the exotic animal industry who loans animals to circuses and fairs and the film and television industries. And after years of being repeatedly fined by the USDA for violating federal animal welfare laws, he now wants to work with PETA to retire his animals and to leave the business for good. So thanks to you and other generous supporters for helping us to give 67 bears and countless other exploited and abused animals a way out of their misery.
Thanks, Brittany. Thank you for ending this evening's town hall on such a high note. Brittany knows that as she is moving bears from some hellhole to this beautiful sanctuary, wherever they're going, that we're all texting her saying, can we have a photograph? What's happening now? How are they doing? And Brittany is always saying, oh, one's looking out of the window and one's asleep and, you know, they're eating fruit and so on. And it's always a tremendous, just really spirit-raising thing for us all. If you haven't seen the video of Ben and Bogey as they bound out of their cages and into their new home, you can just go online at PETA.org and take a peek. It really, really raises your spirit. Tonight's call illustrates, I hope, how important it is that PETA's work helps animals who are not just cute or familiar to most people, not only those animals who suffer in the food trade, but all animals. We've mentioned half a dozen unique PETA exposés tonight that were released in recent months. And in every case, more people have come to understand that animals are not ours to wear, animals are not ours to eat, etc., etc. And that all brings us closer to the day when the rights of animals are truly respected. I know what it's like to feel appalled and very, very sad after watching video of one of Dan's gentle sheep being bashed in the head by a shearer, or of a donkey being stripped of his skin to produce that traditional Chinese medicine. And we all feel that way. But please remember that some of our most hard-fought victories began when one investigator or one whistleblower just refused to turn a blind eye to animal abuse. Stopping the cruelty in exposés like those that we've described tonight is never easy. But at PETA, we have the compassion, we have the determination, and those are two traits I know every person on this call tonight shares with us. And each person on this call is one person, and one person can do so very, very much because we care. So every time a store agrees to stop selling a product of torture, an animal abuser is exposed on video, or a corporation decides to end practices that fuel cruelty, the world becomes a little kinder place for animals. So while we face many challenges together during the year ahead, I'll say, with your help, lots and lots and lots and lots of animals will be literally let off the hook in 2018. So Ben, I think back to you, and I think we're ready to stop talking and take questions if you're ready for that.
Yes, certainly. Let's get right to those questions. We should have Barbara on the line with a question clarifying the donkey investigation. Barbara, what's your question, please?
You mentioned the product that they're getting from the donkeys. Something they called it Angel. I'd like to know how it's spelled.
Yeah, it's E-Chow. Dan, can you make sure I've got it right? How do you spell it exactly?
Yeah, it's E, D as in dog, J, I, A, O. And it's
Spell it again.
Sorry, E, D as in dog, J, I, A, O.
D, J, I, O, L?
E. Yes, and we will, of course, follow up. We'll follow up with everyone on the call tonight by email with the information on it, too, so you'll have it that way as well. But it's E as in Edward, D as in dog, J, I, A as in Adam, O.
And you can look online, Barbara, and see the whole case is on the front page of PETA.org. So
thank you very much. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for your question, for your answers, Ingrid and Dan. We've got another caller on the line now, Dana from Minnesota, with a question about live animals who are served at restaurants. Dana, what's your question, please?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, you were talking about restaurants that serve live animals. How can we find out which possible restaurants in our own area do that? I'm from Minneapolis, and I'm wondering if there's a list anywhere or somehow to find out if anybody's doing that locally so I don't patronize them.
Dan, do you want that, or shall I take it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I would suggest maybe, calling the Korean restaurants. I mean, unfortunately, that's the cuisine where most of these dishes are being served, and acting, directly. You may get a more truthful answer if you act as if you're interested in it rather than if you are not. That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, it's not often that people are openly advertising this. We just recently saw live fish advertised on a restaurant, and we depend on whistleblowers who spot something on the restaurant menu or who figure this out somehow or see a video online to let us know so that we can jump on it. But it's not something they usually in this country openly advertise, so you have to be pretty vigilant to figure it out. Minneapolis, it's possibly unlikely. Minnesota, possibly unlikely. It's more likely to be on the coast, Los Angeles, and New York, Toronto, that kind of thing. But just have a little look at what Korean restaurants you have locally, just in case.
Thank you, Ingrid. We should have Brian from DC next with a question about bears. Brian, what's your question, please?
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. I was just wondering if you guys have any idea of how many bears are still trapped in these roadside zoos, and what we could do if we run across one of these.
Shall I take that? This is Brittany.
Yes.
Yes, we estimate that there are a little over 1,000 bears remaining in roadside zoos and bear pits and traveling exhibitions across the country right now. And the most important thing that you can do, well, there are several, of course, but the most important thing to do is first take out your camera and take video and photos and send those to us. Share those photos and videos on Facebook, and urge your friends and family not to patronize those establishments. And then when you reach out to us and share the photos and videos, we can we can do our thing and try to help those animals and get them into sanctuaries.
And please
Thank you
make
very
sure
much.
that you go to TripAdvisor and tell them this is a wretched facility, no one should go near it, it'll make the children upset, whatever you have to say.
Right.
And when you send us the pictures, also try to get a refund for going in if you've had to pay. Tell them you were upset. But when you send us the photographs or whatever, please tell us the date that you were there and exactly what you saw, pacing, bar biting, whatever it is. And we'll work with you to get a complaint into local authorities just in case we can get some enforcement action. But we've got a long list. We're working our way through it, and I think it's sort of like Skittles, is as we knock these down, they'll become less and less popular.
Thank you, Ingrid, and thank you, Brian, for your question. We've got a question online that was submitted online next from Joyce in Montana, who asks, I read the news that Nosy will stay at the sanctuary, and I'm over the moon. How did PETA finally win her freedom? Brittany, maybe you want to take this one as well.
Sure, I can take that one. Nosy is in a sanctuary because of the hard work of many people and the dedication of activists around the country, and because of the courage of one wonderful local animal control officer who did her job and confiscated Nosy when she saw that she was being treated cruelly, and a district attorney who did her job, and another judge who did her job. And we don't always see those elements align, but in this case it did, and Nosy is safe, but you know we're working to make sure that she's going to stay there forever.
In case
Thank you
anybody
very much.
doesn't know who Nosy is, just in case, if you go to PETA.org, her story is there. And she's the beleaguered elephant we followed for years. We filed umpteen complaints with the United States Department of Agriculture about. The man lost his license, but he still kept dragging her around the country. We've had her shows canceled in all over the place. And really, we were wearing this man down. His name is Hugh Leibel. When the elephant was confiscated, and so we were very quick to assist with the case, and we're delighted, and we hope that she'll be safe forever.
Thank you, Ingrid. We have, I think, time for one more question. We should have Frank on the line in Chicago. Frank, what's your question, please? Frank, you there? No? Okay, we will take a written question. For Kathy, this one says, we know experiments on animals are cruel, but do they even work? Asks Alex in California. Kathy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is no, they don't. And the studies proving this are in now in a way they've never been before. We know from a study that was published in the British Medical Journal that more than 90% of all studies on animals fail ever to lead to treatment for human disease. So the question, of course, is if they don't work and they're so cruel, why are they still going on? Well, we're fighting that. And we are now going to the federal government, to the National Institutes of Health, the federal agency that funds more animal experiments than any other place in the world, and asking exactly this and demanding that funds be put into better non-animal methods. We're at a time in history when more people than ever before, a majority of people, in fact, oppose animal experimentation. So you can go to PETA.org and read a little bit more about the failure of animal experiments scientifically so that we can act on that as well as what we know to be the cruelty of these studies.
You couldn't have asked a better person that question. Kathy has all those stats at her fingertips and all those studies, and we've been busting labs since 1980. So thanks, everybody who submitted questions tonight. If we missed getting to you, somebody will definitely be in touch with you within the next few days. So your question will be answered for sure. Even after Ben signs off, which will happen in just a second, you can still leave a voice message, and I do hope you will. We would love to hear what you thought of the meeting, any ideas you might have for future PETA Town Halls. And please tell us what plans you have, your own plans to help animals in 2018. We'd like ideas from you that we can pass on to other people who care. And let us know if there are any materials that we can send you. So thank you once again for being a vital, determined advocate, each of you, for PETA and for the animals we help. It's your support that powers everything that we accomplish, and we accomplish a lot. And it's true, as I always say, it's absolutely true. We simply couldn't do this work without you. So thanks again, and have a good evening.
Well, this concludes today's PETA Town Hall. I hope that you'll join us again on April 23rd for a special town hall on PETA's legal work. Thank you all very much, and have a pleasant evening.